things off, and then they'll proceed to begin debate on a bill that would limit the EPA's authority to enforce water quality standards. We expect the House to recess following the rule debate on that. More work on, and more work, too, on the 2012 Energy and Water Spending Bill. Live coverage now of the House on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. God of the universe, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We ask, and will never stop asking, that you bless the members, men and women, of the People's House. Remember that in the very first Congress there were problems whose possible solutions seemed to generate division in the Congress. Our national ancestors were able then to overcome their differences to work toward a common goal. Our very existence is proof that such cooperative work can succeed. Send your spirit of wisdom upon the members during these contentious days. Grant them the courage to work together with charity, to join their efforts to accomplish what our nation needs to live into a prosperous and secure future. May they understand that they, like their political forebears, make history in the work they do and continue to build the foundation upon which our republic rests. Help them to build together an ever stronger foundation. May all that is done this day in the People's House be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof, and pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 one-minute requests. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, our friends and neighbors are hurting. Last week, the Department of Labor told us that the unemployment rate has climbed to 9.2%. That's unacceptable. This number reflects, in part, the policies of an administration that is embracing bureaucracy and red tape more than entrepreneurship and common sense. Let me give you a local example. A respected developer in my district he's got a job-creating project that is ready to go and has the full support of the city of Virginia Beach, which has already invested millions of dollars in infrastructure improvements for the project. And unlike so many of the projects that have been talked about, this really is shovel-ready. HUD just needs to give it a green light. But all we're seeing is red, because HUD is locked into a bureaucratic culture evidenced by a rigid first-in, first-out policy. It's resulted in an expensive 6-month delay. It's putting the entire project in jeopardy. America can't afford even one more month of these kind of job numbers. So to the leadership of HUD, I'm asking you, work overtime, do what you must as entrepreneurs do. Do what you must to turn these applications around in a timely manner, and you'll unleash the greatest job-creating engine the world's ever known, the American entrepreneur. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island arise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Dr. Patricia Flanagan, Rhode Island's nationally recognized expert in the area of teenage parenting and adolescent medicine. Dr. Flanagan recently received the 2011 Silver Rattle Award from the Rhode Island Mothers and Healthy Babies Coalition for her years of leadership and dedicated service to Rhode Island's teen mothers and children. Dr. Flanagan is rattling the system with her groundbreaking ideas and service to the Hasbro Children's Hospital community. She serves as the Chief of Clinical Affairs at Hasbro, the President of the American Academy of Pediatrics Rhode Island chapter, and a Professor of Pediatrics at Brown University. As Director of the Teens with Tots Clinic at Hasbro Children's Hospital, she leads the team in providing social and medical services to nearly 300 teen mothers and their children, following their lives for up to 5 years. Today, I'm pleased to congratulate Dr. Patricia Flanagan for her great contributions to the field of maternal and child health as a pediatrician, a researcher, a teacher, and an advocate. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, provided to extend my remarks.
Without objection, so
Mr.
recognized.
Speaker, today the Fed Chairman, Mr. Bernanke, is indicating that they're going to increase the money supply again. They call it QE3. But the American people need to know that means they're going to print more money. And when they print more money, that makes the value of your dollar and your currency worth less. That means milk is going to cost more, or bread's going to cost more, because the federal government's not living within its means, and they're going to print more money that's going to make all of our currency worth less. I want to tell you what's happened in other countries when we've done this. In Hungary in 1946, the price of everything doubled every 16 hours. In Yugoslavia in 1994, the prices doubled every 34 hours. In Germany in 1923, the price of everything doubled every 4 days. In Greece in 1944, it doubled every 4 days. And in Zimbabwe in 2008, it doubled every 24 hours. We need to stop this printing of money. We need to control spending in this body instead of letting the Fed print more money, which is a hidden tax on everybody in this country. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our nation and our world is at an economic crossroads, with the debt ceiling needed to be raised by the 2nd of August. Fortunately, I think some common sense appears to be coming from the Senate, from Senator Mitch McConnell. The idea of surrendering but claiming victory, more noble than admitting defeat, and much more noble than putting this nation and the world on an economic precipice, all based upon the resistance of putting tax increases on the millionaires and billionaires in this nation. People who have benefited and haven't hurt one iota are being told that by the Republicans that they will not agree to a compromise if it causes an increase in taxes for the millionaires and billionaires. Those tax breaks from the Bush years that helped cause this debt problem and cause the recession. So I praise Senator McConnell for claiming victory and surrendering in a noble way and keeping our economy. Hopefully this project will be successful and save us from having a catastrophic Wall Street and bond market collapse. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In spite of the empty rhetoric of politicians who promise now and pay later, not even the United States federal government can run from the simple principles of economics. When a family continues to spend more than they make, debt will crush them. It will strain their relationships and consume their thoughts. Parents look at their children and wonder how they will afford college. Motivated by their love, mom and dad pull out the checkbook. They go to the kitchen table and they make a plan. What are we spending now? How can we spend less? Where can we make do? And how can we put us back in the black? Mr. Speaker, that's called a budget. It works in Indiana, and if it works well enough for us Hoosiers, it's good enough for the federal government. Unfortunately, it's been over 800 days since the Senate even passed a budget. Both parties have their fair share in the blame for running us into the red. A balanced budget amendment, however, ought to get bipartisan support here in Washington. Now is the time for action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, today the House will take up the so-called Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act, a bill that would more aptly be named the Dirty Water Act. Rarely does this body so blatantly attempt to deceive and misinform that in the case of a bill that is in neither spirit nor practice seek cleaner water. This legislation would render the EPA toothless to enforce the Clean Water Act, giving polluters more leeway to break from clean water standards, and make it more difficult for the Army Corps of Engineers to receive constructive advice from environmental experts during the permit process. Additionally, the bill would make it impossible for the EPA to adjust clean water standards accordingly if new science emerges, an appropriately anti-science provision for those who have promoted a head-in-the-sand attitude toward addressing our environmental problems. We cannot stand by quietly during this attempt to lower water quality standards under the Orwellian mantle of clean water, and I hope this body does not fall for the Dirty Water Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Request the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we are now in week number 27 of the Republican No Jobs agenda. It is apparent that after last week's disappointing jobs report, that job growth should be our #1 priority, but my colleagues across the aisle seem to have not received this message. Since January 1, not a single bill focusing on job creation has come to the floor. Instead, the majority has chosen to focus on legislation that will roll back energy efficiency standards, clean water protection, and health care improvement. Now it seems the majority is threatening to hold the economy hostage. They're refusing to raise the debt ceiling unless we continue to providing breaks for big oil and companies that ship jobs overseas. Instead of focusing on an agenda that balances the budgets on the backs of America's middle class and seniors, this Congress needs to focus on a plan that will put America back to work. My Democratic colleagues and I launched an ambitious Make It in America agenda that will rebuild our manufacturing base, create jobs, and position us for long-term economic competition. Mr. Speaker, the millions of unemployed Americans need us to work together to come up with a viable solution to job growth and rebuild our economy.
What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Mr. Speaker, to ask permission to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise today because it's obvious to all of us we need initiatives that make America more competitive. We need to tap into the can-do spirit of Americans and out-innovate the rest of the world and all those things that made this country so great. We must be able to out-innovate, out-educate, and out-build the rest of the world. As my colleague said, we need to make it in America. And yes, we can do it at the same time that we address long-term national debt. We can cut waste and balance the budget, but we also have to ensure the opportunity for growth exists. In southern Minnesota, we have a rich tradition of small businesses building from the ground up, becoming world-class like the Mayo Clinic. We are leading the nation in renewable energy and biotech research and ways of providing food for not only this country but the world. We can support job creation today and in the future by encouraging businesses to make products and innovate here in the United States and sell to the world. Mr. Speaker, when we make it in America, American families will make it too. Let's create good-paying jobs here at home, and let's rebuild the middle class. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is with deep regret that I rise today to inform the House of the passing of our former colleague and my dear good friend, Frank Mascara. Frank passed away earlier this week and will be laid to rest tomorrow in his beloved Washington County in western Pennsylvania. Frank dedicated his life to public service, serving as county controller in Washington County, followed by 15 years as a county commissioner in Washington County. He then served with distinction in this body from 1995 to 2003, where he dedicated his career to working on transportation issues important not only to his district, but to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and all across the country. Frank will truly be missed, and we extend our thoughts and prayers to his wife, Dolores, and his children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank my good friend, the Speaker, and I am delighted to stand this morning and simply ask a question. Where are the jobs? And why have we been here for some 27 weeks and we've not been able to say to the American people, we're on your side? Let me deviate for a moment and say the debt ceiling that has consumed us is a procedural matter that has occurred over the years and decades of presidents, Republicans and Democrats. And so let's not castigate President Obama and say a deal would not be made because he's here. Let's look at ways of finding jobs. The energy industry, for example, has a program that says veterans to jobs, energy jobs. Let's have youth to jobs, 18 to 35, energy jobs, and begin to create the jobs that Democrats have been fighting for, putting on the floor of the House job creation. Let's have the energy industry broadly look at a tax structure that is responsible and invest back in America. And let's realize that the vulnerable cannot be the brunt of our confusion about the debt ceiling. This is not a fight that we need on behalf of the American people. What we need to do is to say to the American people, here is a job, and we are staying on this floor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to create jobs. Mr. Speaker, now is the time for jobs. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 27 weeks the Republicans have been in charge of this House, and they have not brought a single jobs bill to the floor. Instead, House leadership has set aside dogmatically asserting the goals of repealing health care reform and dismantling even the most basic of environmental regulations. Republicans have brought us so far down the path of mass deregulation that even the most basic safeguards are under threat. They brought forth insipid legislation to repeal light bulb efficiency standards and is still fighting against essential clean water regulation. The reality is that both of these efforts will kill jobs and hurt innovation. But the Republicans seem perfectly comfortable sticking to the rhetoric of anti-regulation, regardless of whom it harms. We've gone so far down this path that the anti-tax dogma of the House majority is now bringing the debt ceiling negotiations to a terrible brink of catastrophe. They would rather preserve tax breaks for their corporate jet owners and oil companies than to compromise on a plan that will benefit the middle class in America by better distributing that tax burden. It's wrong. Let's come to the table. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so recognized.
Last week, the nation heard disheartening news. Unemployment is up to 9.2%. But the American people don't need reports to tell them what they already know, that job growth should be Congress's top priority. But the Republicans still aren't getting the message. It's been 27 weeks since they took control, and they have done nothing to create jobs. In fact, they haven't put a single jobs bill to a vote. Instead, they are threatening the loss of countless more American jobs by bringing the debt ceiling talks to the brink of economic catastrophe. They are holding America's economy and the American people hostage to their agenda of tax cuts for the rich and loopholes that help mega corporations. We need House leaders looking out for the American people and creating jobs, not cutting them. We need strong House leaders who will protect the American people, not corporate interests.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, so recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there are ongoing negotiations about how to deal with our nation's budget deficit. And while we need to make the tough cuts as part of the package, we also need new revenues. One idea for new revenues would be to regulate and tax marijuana and hemp across the country. 15 states and the District of Columbia have various level degrees of medical marijuana or legalized marijuana. And yet, rather than have any tax at the federal level that actually produces income, we effectively have a 100% tax. Namely, it's confiscated by the federal government if it's discovered. By reducing the tax rate on marijuana and hemp to be in line with alcohol and tobacco, we will generate tens of billions of dollars for revenue to reduce the deficit, and it won't make marijuana or hemp legal in any jurisdiction in this country where it's currently illegal. It'll simply collect revenue from the states that have chosen to go down the route of medical marijuana or marijuana legalization and create revenue for the taxpayers to bring to the table as part of this deficit deal. I encourage my colleagues to support reducing the marijuana tax, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On October 15th of 2009, I received disturbing reports that a democracy activist Tran Khai Tan Thuy and her husband, Do Ba Tan, were beaten in front of their 13-year-old daughter and imprisoned by the Vietnamese police and government. And since then, I, along with some of my colleagues here in the House, have written countless letters to the Vietnamese government urging the government to release Mrs. Tran. And I have also engaged in direct communications with Secretary Clinton, strongly advocating that the United States put pressure on the government of Vietnam to release her and so many other activists who simply want human rights to improve in Vietnam. Fortunately, last month, thanks to the work of human rights organizations and members of Congress, Mrs. Tran was released and the State Department was able to bring Mrs. Tran to the United States, where she now resides with her daughter. Mrs. Tran, along with other activists, were all arrested simply for wanting human rights. I urge my colleagues to please help us with this issue, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection, so recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to talk about jobs. My home district, the capital region of New York, is a leader in clean energy jobs. But don't take my word for it. The Brookings Institution recently completed a study that found the capital region has the largest share of green jobs in the country. It is at over 6%. That's over 28,000 green jobs. And not only is the region growing now, it is poised for growth in the future. Whether at Albany Nanotech, GE, Plug Power, AWS True Power, or Global Foundries, the capital region is producing the high-tech manufacturing jobs of today and tomorrow. And this doesn't just impact our domestic economy. Along with L.A., New York, and San Francisco, Albany is the only other metro area contributing $1 billion annually in the clean export economy. We can make it in America. We can manufacture the best products in the world here and do so in a way that grows jobs and rebuilds our economy. The real question is, does this Congress believe we are worthy of that investment? I think we are. Let's invest in jobs for America, and in so doing, let's cut the deficit. This report from Brookings Institution proves it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut arise? Without objection, so recognized.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I stood on this floor with 3 weeks to go before August 2nd, the debt ceiling, to make the argument that we should abide by the commitments that we have made in the past. Today I heard Chairman Bernanke of the Federal Reserve say that to fail to raise the debt ceiling would be devastating for jobs. So what's the holdup? Don't take it from me. Let me read you a paragraph from The Economist magazine. This is not Mother Jones. This is not even the New York Times. This is The Economist magazine. The sticking point is not on the spending side. It is because the vast majority of Republicans, driven on by the wilder-eyed members of their party and the cacophony of conservative media, are clinging to the position that not a single cent of deficit reduction must come from a higher tax take. This is economically illiterate and disgracefully cynical. Let me read that again. This is economically illiterate and disgracefully cynical. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Utah rise?
Not rising here. Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 347 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 52, House Resolution 347. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2018, to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to preserve the authority of each state to make determinations relating to the state's water quality standards and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order, except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill, and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purposes of debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days during which they can revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, this resolution provides for a structured rule and makes in order 10 specific amendments that were received by the Rules Committee. 9 of those were offered by Democrats. Only 1 amendment made in order was offered by a Republican. So the vast majority of amendments that were received by the Rules Committee, which are in compliance with House rules, were made in order under this resolution, with most being from Democrats. So this is a very fair rule and continues the record of the Rules Committee in this Congress of making as many amendments in order as possible, which conform to House rules. So I commend Chairman Dreyer for continuing the record of fairness and openness in the formation of this particular rule. Likewise, I'd also like to commend the Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Mica, for bringing this bill forward. Mr. Speaker, I'm a co-sponsor of this legislation, which seeks to restore just a little bit of balance between states and the federal government when it comes to implementation of clean water mandates. Clean Water Act was originally intended by Congress to restore and maintain the integrity of our nation's waters, which is a noble goal. Who can be opposed to that? We all support the idea of clean water in our nation, our communities, but the Clean Water Act was originally intended to be a partnership between the states and the federal government and allowed the states to be authorized as the lead authority for water quality programs and permits. Unfortunately, the bill was written in a very careless and sloppy way. And so time has come when it can be re-altered or reinterpreted as time goes on. It doesn't matter that the Constitution does not allow that. The Constitution clearly says that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress. What we have done is see an agency of the federal government start to expand beyond their responsibility because the legislation itself, the core legislation, is somewhat vague. John Marshall once said that agencies should have the power to fill in the details. We're not talking about details. We're talking about where agencies of the federal government have expanded their power and responsibility far beyond what was ever intended, specifically when it relates to the value and the priority of states. For example, the state of Florida had previously obtained an EPA approval for its statewide water quantity, quality, and nutritional criteria development plan. And even though the state of Florida is well underway in developing its own nutrient standards based on those earlier federal approvals, the EPA in 2010 decided to step in and, with what Nelson Rockefeller used to say as the deadening hand of bureaucracy, imposed its own new water quality standards for nutrients on the state of Florida. It violated the implicit state and federal partnership established under the original Clean Water Act and stomped all over the good work that Florida had been doing when it was completing its tasks based on those earlier federal approvals. In other states, the same thing has happened. West Virginia, the EPA retroactively vetoed permits previously issued for coal mining operations by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's an example of overreaching by administration, specifically the EPA, that has upset the long-standing balance between federal and state partners in regulating our nation's waters and has undermined the system of cooperative federalism that was supposed to have been established in the original Clean Water Act. The EPA's actions have pulled the rug out from under the states in a very capricious and an extremely arrogant manner, have created an atmosphere of regulatory uncertainty for businesses, for local governments, which now have to plan and rely on clean water permits as they think they might be used in the future. This new uncertainty has nothing less than an extremely negative impact on businesses, both large and small, as has been certainly contributed to the negative impacts of our nation's economy and the inability of this administration to create jobs and reduce employment below 9%, in spite of massive and record spending and crushing debt that accomplished it. This bill is indeed common sense. It's a targeted approach at correcting some of the abuses. It's not about distribution of water. It's not actually even about the quality. It's about the process in which we are involved as who gets to decide. And it also restates that the people who live in the states logically care about their own states and do not have to rely on the largesse of the all-wise and all-important federal government to make decisions for them. Passage of H.R. 2018 will not in any way gut the clean air regulations or endanger citizens into drinking dirty water. The EPA retains its ultimate authority. However, the bill has narrowly drafted to preserve the authority of states to make decisions about their own quality standards without interference or retroactive second-guessing by those inside the Beltway bureaucrats who have little or no local knowledge of the conditions or qualities that are under their consideration. The growing excesses of the EPA in second-guessing the states and retroactively revoking previously granted approvals must stop. The status quo hurts people, and it does not help the value or the quantity or the quality of our water. This bill is a good start. It's not the completion of the issue, but it is a good start in trying to provide balance and rationality back into the public process that we have, and, more importantly, allowing people to know that when decisions are made, they are not going to be arbitrarily taken away and changed in the future. No government can operate that way. No business can operate that way. This should not be the policy of the United States. This is a good bill. More importantly, this is an extremely fair rule, and I urge its adoption, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Utah reserves his time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the gentleman from Utah for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
I'd also like to congratulate the gentleman from Utah on the occasion of his birthday and convey my warm birthday wishes to the gentleman from Utah. Despite it being his birthday, however, I have to disagree with much of what he said regarding this rule and the bill. I rise in opposition to the rule and the bill. This is an important debate that our country has had for generations with regard to state sovereignty, the role of federal government. And it's an ongoing discussion since the revolutionary discussions of Jefferson, Adams, and Hamilton. And as the pendulum of popular discourse swings back and forth on this fundamental issue, our country has concluded without a doubt that at the very least there are certain decisions that affect the whole country and interstate commerce that cannot be made unilaterally by different states. That's true for civil rights with regard to the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. It's true for immigration, which can only be addressed at a national level. And it's undoubtedly also true, as I'll describe, for the protection of our environment and public health. Responsibility is fundamentally an American value, taking responsibility for your own actions. But, Mr. Speaker, cancer clusters, polluted air, and polluted water don't know state boundaries. The Cuyahoga, on its way to Lake Erie, literally caught on fire
over pollution when the Clean Water Act was written. It wouldn't stop burning simply because of a state borderline. Spilled oil in Montana's Yellowstone River won't stop at the border of North Dakota as it joins the Missouri River and makes its way down to the mighty Mississippi. Maintaining the federal government's basic structure, the Clean Water Act, ensures that each state meets the basic safety standards in their own way, giving them flexibility, but it's a critical application of federal authority with regard to interstate commerce and interstate activities. The interstate nature of polluted air, polluted water, and the devastating effect that pollution has on all of our health as well as our economy and jobs with regard to recreational opportunities demonstrates clearly that it's an issue that should be confronted by all of our states together in the United States of America here at the seat of the federal government. Mr. Speaker, let's not fool ourselves. The bill before us today isn't just about the role of federal government. The bill isn't just a push for state sovereignty. Rather, this bill is satisfying two very niche special interests at the cost of the American public. This bill is designed to benefit mountaintop coal mining companies and large factory farms. H.R. 2018 would restrict EPA's ability to revise an existing water quality standard or promulgate a new one unless the state concurs, effectively giving veto power to each state. It would prohibit EPA from rejecting a water quality certification granted by a state. It would prohibit EPA from withdrawing approval of a state or from limiting federal financial assistance for the state program if a state is out of compliance with water quality standards. Mr. Speaker, mountaintop coal mining deserves a legitimate debate here in this body, and perhaps the gentleman from Utah and I might agree on some parts of that and disagree on others. That debate needs to carefully examine the arguments of jobs in the coal industry, energy independence versus environmental and public health concerns, also legitimate concerns. But that debate shouldn't be held under the guise of state control or under the guise of water pollution permits. This is a backdoor handout for a few destructive companies. It's not something that should be discussed under the context of federalism. I, for one, think that oversight of mountaintop mining is critical, and again, I'm happy to have that discussion. Continued handouts to the coal industry keep us addicted to the dirty source of energy when more jobs and a better standard of living and true energy independence are possible today through clean energy born of American innovation. I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Utah.
How much time do you want? Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman from Georgia and a member of the Rules Committee 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as a member of the Rules Committee. And, Mr. Speaker, for folks who don't follow exactly what the Rules Committee does, you know, the Rules Committee is that committee that's the very last committee to touch any piece of legislation that comes to the floor. And it's the responsibility of the Rules Committee then to decide what kind of choices will we be able to make about the bill once it gets to the floor. Now, there was a time in this House, Mr. Speaker, where what that meant was the Rules Committee closed that process down, didn't allow any other options, any other opinions, no amendments at all, sent a bill to the floor and said, take it or leave it. But, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of Chairman Dreyer on the Rules Committee and under the leadership here of the Speaker of the House, that process has begun to change. Now, it's not perfect, but it's begun to change, and I rise in support of a rule today where the Rules Committee asks all 435 members of this House, when it comes to the Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act, asked all 435 members of this House, what would you like to see changed about this bill? How would you like to see this bill improved? What would you like done differently in this piece of legislation? As you know, Mr. Speaker, yesterday we had that exact same process on the flood insurance program. And not only did we allow lots and lots and lots of amendments to the flood insurance program, we even allowed an amendment to eliminate the flood insurance program altogether. That's the kind of openness that has been incorporated in this 112th Congress. Well, this rule today is no exception. That's why I rise in strong support of it. We ask all 435 members of the House, how would you improve the Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act? Send in your amendment now. Have it pre-printed. Let us come and consider your ideas. And, Mr. Speaker, we did that. Republicans and Democrats alike. I have here, we only had one Republican amendment submitted. We made that in order. We had 11 Democrat amendments submitted.
one of those was non-germane, one was duplicative, the other 9 were made in order. Here we are, Republican-controlled Congress, Mr. Speaker, and through the leadership of the Speaker and the Chairman of the Rules Committee, we've said all amendments should be pre-printed, all amendments should be considered. And here we are on the floor of the House today, Republican House, considering 1 Republican amendment and 9 Democratic amendments. Now, a lot of folks ask why that is, Mr. Speaker. I get that every time I go back home. I live in a very conservative Republican district, as you know, Mr. Speaker. And so folks say, Rob, why don't you just shut down the process and do it your way, because your way is the right way? And I tell them, you're absolutely right. In our part of the world, our opinion is the right opinion. But there are a lot of other opinions. You get to Washington, D.C., 435 members of Congress. That's 435 opinions. Sometimes it's 436, 437 opinions among the 435 of us. And we can only have this body, the People's House, work its will when all of the people are heard. And I just say, and I thank the gentleman from Utah for yielding, it has been such a pleasure to be a part of a Rules Committee and serving with folks like the gentleman from Colorado, whose editorial I read in the paper this morning with great interest. Serve on a committee with folks like the gentleman from Colorado, the gentleman from Utah, who are committed to openness in this process. I'm a believer, Mr. Speaker. I'm one of the new guys. I've only been here 6 months. I believe that we can do better for America when we do things in an open process. Now, because I come from a conservative district, I know for a fact that when we open up the process to all comers, I'm going to lose, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to lose because this House kind of sits in the middle. We're a center-right nation. So I come from a far-right district. That means I'm going to lose. But I tell you, as an American, I want this House to work its will. I want this body to work the way the Founders intended it to work. I want us to take these baby steps, Mr. Speaker, towards restoring the faith of the American people in the work that we do here. And so, again, it is with great pride that I rise today as a member of the Rules Committee, as someone who supported this rule, and as someone who is so appreciative of the leadership of Chairman Dreyer and of Speaker Boehner and of our friends on the other side of the aisle who enable us to make this process the open process that it is. I encourage all my colleagues to vote in favor of this rule and then to vote their conscience on the underlying provision. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New York, the ranking member on the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee, Mr. Bishop.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Colorado for yielding. I rise in opposition to this rule, and I also oppose the underlying bill. Mr. Chairman, I was heartened that my Republican colleagues accepted many of the amendments offered in the Rules Committee yesterday, and I commend them for their attempts to adhere to the open process that they promised. However, I was disappointed that an amendment offered by my good friend from Missouri, Mr. Carnahan, was not made in order because it would have addressed perhaps one of the most fundamental areas of concern for this bill that I and a great many others share, and that is that it undermines the federal floor on water quality standards that has made the Clean Water Act such a success. This body should have had the opportunity to vote on such an important issue, and yet the rule denies that opportunity. I am a strong supporter of efforts to protect the Long Island Sound, which borders the northern shore of my district and also the southern shore of Connecticut. In my view, the investment of federal, state, and local resources to clean up and protect the Sound significantly benefits communities in my district and in our region generally in terms of increased economic productivity, increased revenues from commercial and recreational uses of the Sound, and increased quality of life for local residents. As a New Yorker, I take great pride in the efforts my state has made in improving the water quality of the Sound, and I appreciate the collective efforts of our neighboring states in cleaning up the Sound. However, under H.R. 2018, we revert back to the state-by-state, go-it-alone approach that was the hallmark of water pollution prevention before the enactment of the Clean Water Act. Under H.R. 2018, if the EPA proposes a revised water quality standard that science dictates is needed to clean up the sound, and Connecticut decides that they don't want to implement that standard, the EPA would no longer have the authority to compel them to do so, nor would New York have any recourse under the Clean Water Act to ensure that Connecticut or other upstream states are doing what is needed. In other words, a recipe for the kind of pollution that we dealt with prior to the implementation of the Clean Water Act. For this and a great many other reasons, H.R. 2018 flies in the face of decades of experience in implementing the Clean Water Act and risks all the gains in water quality that we have made over the past 40 years. For that, I urge my colleagues to oppose the rule and the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Utah reserves. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Missouri, a member of the Water Resources Subcommittee, Mr. Carnahan.
The senator from Missouri is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Colorado, Mr. Polis, for yielding and for the work he is doing on this rule. I appreciate the consideration of the Rules Committee in making one of the amendments I offered on this bill in order. However, I offered a second amendment that gets right at the heart of the issues addressed by this legislation, and unfortunately, this amendment was not made in order. I can only assume this is because the majority does not want a floor debate that demonstrates the weaknesses inherent in this legislation. My constituents in the St. Louis region I represent understand how important the Clean Water Act is. Situated at the confluence of our country's two greatest rivers, the Mississippi and the Missouri, St. Louis has a long relationship with the mighty rivers. We've long relied on the rivers to take our products to market and to connect us to the rest of the country. And of course, we depend on them to provide clean drinking water. At the same time, we have learned to rebuild after devastating floods, and I'm sorry to see that this year this may well go down in history as the most devastating year for flooding since the epic year of 1993. I appreciate that the Rules Committee made an order in my amendment which will allow us to debate and vote to ensure provisions which help ensure that flooded communities do not have to worry about unclean and unsafe water as they recover. However, Mr. Speaker, my constituents want to know that their water is clean and safe at all times, not just in the wake of natural disasters. This bill seeks to give states greater control over their water, but unfortunately water does not always obey state borders. This bill fails. It fails to ensure that water flowing from an upstream state meets the standards for water quality for any of the downstream states. This legislation will undermine the precedents we have established since President Nixon signed the Clean Water Act into law in 1972 that allows the EPA to balance the concerns of different states and ensure clean drinking water for everyone. If H.R. 2018 were to become law as it stands now, the EPA would lose this critical ability. In that case, Missouri would have little recourse if, say, Minnesota or Illinois decided to adopt clean water standards below what is acceptable to Missouri. In my amendment, which was not made in order, it is simple. It would have exempted water that travels between states, thus solving the issue of differing standards between states. If one state chooses to allow polluters to discharge harmful chemicals into a shared water body, other states that share the waters should have a say. An EPA should step in and ensure basic standards are met. Unfortunately, H.R. 2018, without my amendment, will allow states to adopt inconsistent standards that will create uncertainty for business, damage our environment, and undermine our public health. Mr. Speaker, I urge a no vote, and I yield back.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
I'm ready. I still reserve. Could I inquire on how many speakers the gentleman from Colorado actually has?
It's possible we have one speaker on the way, but if I'm prepared to close. If he shows up while I'm speaking, I'll plan to yield to him.
All right, I still reserve then.
I yield myself the balance of my time.
Colorado.
I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, recent peer-reviewed scientific studies suggest that mountaintop mining is associated with higher cancer risk and elevated birth defect rates and many other health problems. In Appalachian coal mining communities, rates of cancer and birth defects are much higher, and with direct links in mountaintop mining practices to the national average, and even higher than in areas with traditional coal mining. Is this really what the rest of us are being asked to subsidize at the cost of our own states and our health? If we want to debate mountaintop mining, let's do it. And there are pros and cons, legitimate issues, and stalking horses as well. But we don't want to hurt the rest of the states in that process. This bill throws into question a balance between state and federal authority that served the American people well for 30 years. Why should the rest of us once again pay the price for the gain of a few coal mining companies or a few factory farms when most Americans would prefer that we protect Chesapeake Bay and the Everglades? Oklahoma continues to battle Arkansas over water pollution from poultry farms, which starts in Arkansas and flows into Oklahoma. Why are we voting on a bill that would let Arkansas decide the fate of Oklahoma's waters? Why should a community in Tennessee, whose economy is booming thanks to whitewater rafting and the growth of the outdoor recreation industry, live and die by the decisions of a North Carolina mining company? Are we really going to vote for the ability of Pennsylvania to decide the fate of New York, Maryland, and West Virginia rivers when Pennsylvania has decided that fracking with chemicals should be done without meaningful oversight? I'll be interested to see how these pronounced downstream states vote on these measures, and it'll be interesting to see the outcome of this bill and how anybody who supports it from the downstream states can possibly justify it to their constituents on the receiving end of interstate pollution. H.R. 2018 would undermine the federal government's ability to ensure that states effectively implement or make necessary improvements to their water quality standards. If states fail to adhere to their own existing water quality standards, the bill would prohibit EPA from insisting that states make the improvements that are necessary. Regarding dredge and fill projects, H.R. 2018 would stymie EPA's ability to stop discharges that have unacceptable adverse effects on municipal water supplies. Now, although this veto authority has only been used 13 times in the past 38 years, it's a critical tool that safeguards against the most destructive and health-threatening proposals. Americans expect and rely on clean water and clean air. We breathe and drink every day. The nation's lakes, rivers, bays, wetlands, and streams are vital to our health and vital to our economy. From the Chesapeake Bay to the Great Lakes or the Florida Everglades, all of these waterways and beaches are of interest and value and importance to our entire country. They need to be clean enough to swim and drink and fish from. Americans should have safe, clean water to drink. H.R. 2018 would remove EPA's ability to protect communities from unacceptable adverse effects to our nation's waters and public health. Before the Clean Water Act, there wasn't an effective federal safety net to ensure the health of our waters. But since the passage of the Clean Water Act, we've made great strides in restoring our waterways. This bill threatens to move that back. Our current waterways are critical for our economy in my home state of Colorado and across the country. Waterways sustain the activities of 40 million anglers and sportsmen who spend about $45 billion a year, and about 2.3 million people who spend over $1 billion a year hunting, as well as multi-billion-dollar commercial fishing industry. Again, we have a national interest on these issues, and it should not be consistent with the American value of responsibility within the ability of any one particular state to damage the economy and health of people in another state. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Utah is recognized.
I'm happy to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 2018, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me this time. Last year, Thomas Donahue, the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, said in a speech to a major jobs summit, quote, "Taken collectively, the regulatory activity now underway is so overwhelmingly beyond anything we have ever seen that we risk moving this country away from a government of the people to a government of regulators." Mr. Speaker, if we are ever going to see an economic recovery, if we are ever going to create enough jobs for our young people, we have got to stop this explosion of federal rules, regulations, and red tape. This country could be booming right now, but it is being held back by federal bureaucrats who have very little or no business experience and who do not realize how difficult it is to survive in small business or on small farms today. This is my 23rd year in the Congress. I believe I've heard and read more complaints about the EPA in the last couple of years than about all other agencies, federal agencies combined. This bill is a very moderate attempt to rein in environmental radicals at the EPA and put some common sense and, more importantly, some fairness in these clean water rulings. I've heard from farmers, home builders, small business people, realtors, coal miners, small property owners, and others. These rules and regulations do not hurt the big giants in business. In fact, they help them by driving out competition. But they are sure hurting the little guy, and they are hurting poor and lower income people by driving up the cost of houses, the cost of food, and everything else, and destroying jobs. Simply put, the EPA is out of control. A few years ago, when I chaired the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee, we heard testimony from a cranberry farmer in Massachusetts. During his testimony, he broke down into tears over the way he was treated by the EPA. The EPA claimed he filled 46 acres of wetlands that the farmer said never existed. The farmer, Mr. Johnson, spent $2 million over 2 decades fighting this case. At the end of it, Mr. Johnson said he was disgusted by all the millions of dollars the government spent on a small section of his 400-acre farm. He said, quote, "For the money they spent, they could have bought all of our property with half of it." Several years ago, in one of the most famous wetland cases, the trial judge in a federal court said, quote, "I don't know if it's just a coincidence that I just sentenced Mr. Gonzalez, a person selling dope on the streets of the United States. He is an illegal person here. He's not an American citizen. He has a prior criminal record. So here we have a person who comes to the United States and commits crimes of selling dope, and the government asked me to put him in prison for 10 months. And then we have an American citizen who buys land, pays for it with his own money, and he moves some sand from one end to the other, and the government wants me to give him 63 months in prison." And the judge said, "Now, if that isn't our system gone crazy, I don't know what it is." Mr. Speaker, that's what this bill is all about. We've had so many of these bureaucratic rulings that have just gone crazy. And this, can I have 30 seconds?
I yield an additional minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this is supposed to be...
one additional minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this is supposed to be a federal system in which our founding fathers felt more power should be given to the states than to the national government. They certainly didn't envision a federal dictatorship with the states being dictated to by unelected federal bureaucrats. This bill does not go very far, but it at least tries to put a little more balance and fairness back into our system so that we can have both clean water and a stronger economy. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I have no additional speakers. I'm prepared to close. I'd like to ask the gentleman from Utah if he has any remaining speakers.
No, I don't, although I may be surprised again, but I'm ready to close as well.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, from a purely self-interested perspective as a Coloradan, and perhaps we have very little to lose as we're a headwaters state, snow that falls in my district on the Continental Divide either ends up in the Arkansas or Mississippi rivers flowing towards the Gulf of Mexico, or ends up in the Colorado River supplying my friend from Utah State as well as Arizona, Nevada, and California. The Continental Divide runs right through my district in the state of Colorado. If Colorado, for example, opened its door to unregulated uranium mining, it's Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and California who would have to pay that price. Regardless of self-interest, clean water is an interstate issue that deserves an interstate solution. I can't think of anything better that better fits the description of interstate commerce, which is enshrined in our Constitution itself. Truly, how we deal with our interstate waterways is at the very base of interstate commerce. Safe drinking water is critical to economic growth and survival of all communities nationally and all people in the entire world. While states appropriately have led the role in implementing clean water safeguards, the law does not function effectively without a backstop and a floor provided by the federal government that ensures that people have clean water and safe drinking water, regardless of the state in which they live. Mr. Speaker, you've heard today the call for the right of federal overreach, of an out-of-control EPA, that kind of rhetoric. And again, valid discussions about the degree of regulation from the EPA, how to deal with mountaintop coal mining, all important policy discussions, but they're simply avoided and punted in the wrong way by saying that these aren't legitimate interstate issues that have their nexus here at the federal level. This bill is truly about a handout to special interests. A vote for this bill is a vote with a few well-lobbied companies and a vote against the health and environment of downstream states and downstream residents, which, as I noted above, include just about every person in the country. I encourage my colleagues to oppose the rule and the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also appreciate my good friend from Colorado and the way he has conducted in this rule. I have to admit, in closing on this particular bill, that I, as someone who as a state legislator worked on a complex that dealt with the largest undeveloped river in my district that went through and crossed 6 different state boundaries before it found its way to the Great Salt Lake. The idea that only the federal government can actually solve issues that happen between states or cross state boundaries is somewhat almost insulting to the idea of the states. It is maybe true that in every issue there is always some catalyst that brings it about. The issue in Florida and West Virginia to which I responded was a catalyst, but it is not the only situation that has provided the basis for this particular bill. We have a letter from the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry who has written in support of this bill simply because Louisiana is currently facing a similar threat from the EPA. Chamber of Commerce strongly opposes several amendments to this piece of legislation, but they also wrote that the Clean Water Act grants states the primary responsibility for protecting water quality. However, recent actions by the EPA upset and supplant this partnership with arbitrary federal power that is being exercised even over states with effective delegated regulatory programs. Individuals and firms that meet the requirements of and obtain permits from state regulators ought not to be left exposed to the enforcement whims and caprice of the federal government, which is the reality. Finally, the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture also talk about this bipartisan piece of legislation that addresses the Environmental Protection Agency's ongoing regulatory overreach, and that it allows the basis, if we pass this bill, for states and the federal government once again to be able to work together. I have stated repeatedly that one of the problems we do have with the provisions of the Clean Water Act is the concept of accountability. Where is someone allowed to kind of comprehend against what the federal government does when it overreaches? Let me give you one specific example, since the gentleman from Tennessee did, and it states the same concept that happens to be there. We'll call this guy Gene because that's his first name. But he was a farmer on a family farm, a sugar beet farmer, which I would remind you is a root crop. You try to have a sugar beet crop in wetlands and you come up with just rotted vegetables. But one federal bureaucrat from these agencies, driving by his property one day, seeing it flooded, declared it to be a wetland, even though the farmer said the only reason the water is there is because we have a pipe from the creek that goes over to the land. And when the farmer removed the pipe from the creek to show that the water was not natural flowing into that area, he was threatened with jail term if he actually moved that pipe one more time. Now, even though they took core samples from the Water Conservancy District that proved there was too much clay in that land to ever have any kind of water bubble up from the underground aquifers, this one bureaucrat from these agencies still maintained this was a wetland. When asked how long would it take to determine, even though the science is against him, that he is wrong in his determination, his response was, well, 6 to 7 years, because I want to go through a wet and dry cycle to see if maybe perchance water may not come up again on this person. Now, the issue and why I'm so passionate about this is because for Gene, this farm was his heritage. More importantly, it was his retirement, and it was his legacy for his kids. And what one bureaucrat, using the broad powers given under the Clean Water Act, was able to do is basically impose a takings on this person's property without ever compensating him for it, because they didn't take the land away, they just told him what he could do with it, and more importantly, because of that regulation now on his property for what he could sell. He was able to finally unload his property at a quarter of the value that a neighbor, from which this one bureaucrat did not see, was able to sell his exact same lot on the exact same road with the exact same type of land. That is the unfairness that has developed with a bill that is so loosely written. 2 Supreme Court decisions have criticized the bill and implored Congress to go back there and do our jobs and to tighten it up so that you don't have conflicting strategies and conflicting patterns and conflicting rules and regulations in different parts of the country. That's what we're attempting to do here. There is a pattern of abuse. It hurts people. It is time to respect the idea that states care as much about their own states as the federal government would care about their states, and you can make the presumption they probably care more. That's why this is a good bill. And that's why this is an issue of federalism. This is going back to what the original Clean Water Act was supposed to do, to encourage and indeed control and ensure that there would be bipartisan cooperation between states and the federal government. And unfortunately, as the years have progressed, the role of the states has been diminished by arbitrary and capricious actions on the part of the federal government. That can no longer be. That is the status quo that is unacceptable. That needs to be changed. That is exactly what this bill is attempting to do. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to reiterate the fairness of this structured rule and urge its adoption, as well as urging the adoption of the underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.